bringing you news and information suppressed by the corporate-controlled media. This is Volcano Radio with Richie Allen.
David Icke, how are you? Good to be chatting with you. But first of all, where were you?
What do you mean, where was I?
We've been on air 4 weeks. You've supported this better than anybody else. And it's only now you're on. I know you've been busy. Great to be chatting with you.
I've been hiding. I keep myself under a bushel, as they say. What it is that I've had a lot on, to say the least, swatting off efforts to bring me down for yet another time. It's been going on for a long time, this one, and also concentrating on Wembley, because I'm going to be talking for the best part of 9-10 hours. Not all at once, of course. And it's 1,600 illustrations and videos, as well as all the music and the dance and the drummers and everything. And so what I like to do, like I did in 2012, is to come away from home and park myself somewhere quiet and just focus on it. Still do the other stuff that I do, like the website, but it gives me a lot of time to focus on the talk, because obviously I ad lib it, and you need all the facts at your fingertips. So that all has to be researched on the way in, and so that's why. But it's not to do with you, mate. I ain't got anything against you. Other people have, but not me, funnily enough.
No, I know that. No, I was being disingenuous. Do you know what's really amazing to me is you did this 2 years ago, and it was extraordinarily successful for you. It was an amazing event, and people were able to see it afterwards on DVD and in other areas. It's amazing to me, because I say, why would anybody put themselves through that again? And then I think to myself, well, you know what? So many things have happened in 2 years, which ordinarily is a small amount of time in the grand scheme of things. But extraordinary things have happened in 2 years that warrant this event at Wembley, I think.
Yeah, what I've been doing for a long time, Rich, is doing an event in London every 2 years, because I always want to have something more, something new, something deeper in the rabbit hole to say. I don't see the point in just keep regurgitating the same thing. And, my philosophy all along as well has been there is so much to know. And whatever we know, there is infinite amounts still to know. So what I'm doing all the time is pushing the cutting edge forward. That's what I'm seeking to do, to learn more, to understand more. And so about every 2 years, I have an update that has taken it forward from beyond the last one. And it's important. These are important, these massive dot connecting things, because when you're dealing with the website and you're dealing with interviews and all these other ways of communicating, you can understandably only deal in various subjects and try to put them into context as best you can. But what I do at Wembley is to go through the whole thing from A to Z, dot connecting the various subjects so that the picture can be seen. And so you start off about 10 o'clock in the morning on the 25th, and I'll start with the nature of reality. And understanding that is absolutely crucial to understanding the later part, where I talk about how we're really manipulated, well beyond where 99.9% of even the conspiracy research movement will go. And then putting today's events in context. It can only be done if you set out the nature of reality, which is nothing like what we're told by mainstream science and mainstream academia. Because the inner sanctum, the inner center of this global web of deceit and manipulation knows the nature of reality. up to a certain point anyway. And it is manipulating from that knowledge. So it knows how people create reality. It knows how, if you can program a perception, that person will manifest that reality. It knows that. But what it's tried to do all along is to stop the rest of us knowing that. That's why the controlled education system won't go there. The controlled science system won't go there. The controlled medical system won't go there. Because if it does, it's no longer there. It's no longer in a job. So the dot connecting over the period of hours, and I know when people first hear it, they go, what? People sit there for that long? Yes, they do. Why? Because it's riveting. And the reason it's riveting is that every minute after minute after minute, another layer goes on the previous layer and the previous layer, and this picture is starting to unfold. It's like a kaleidoscope, which seems a bit fuzzy to start with, and then it's moving and it's moving and it's moving, and suddenly, whoa, it's crystal clear. And it puts the context of world events in such a simple way, because this is simple. It looks complex and it sounds complex, but behind the complexity, and often the complexity that is there to hide the simple nature of it, you can put it together in a simple way that people go away, and from then on, shall we say, their streetwise levels go through the roof. And suddenly, from this perspective, they can read this news event and that news event and that news event. I mean, look at your own story, Rich, as a mainstream a journalist, a mainstream presenter. Once you started getting into this stuff, you start now on a daily basis, you're reading the world from that perspective in a very clear way that wasn't possible until you came across this information. Before, It was just whatever the authorities said, well, it must be right then.
We repeat it. That's right. Didn't I say it to you many times? We had many conversations, you and I, again, not looking for anybody's sympathy, not trying to paint myself out to be a great guy. I mean, I'm just an ordinary guy. But yeah, when I look back at regurgitating rip and read material from the wires and giving it to people without checking it, and realising that that's what we'd come down to as presenters and producers, that we weren't actually doing any investigating at all. We were just basically just saying, this is what we were told to tell you. Here it is. And therefore it's true. It isn't. Yeah, it's been an amazing short few years for me. You've been 30 odd years you've been on this journey.
Yeah. But we've both been in newsrooms and stuff. And investigative journalism, 99.9% of the time, is reading the morning papers and watching News 24 on the BBC telly.
That's true.
And so what you've got is a situation where journalists, of all people, mainstream journalists, are some of the most programmed of all, because all day, at least 5 days a week, they are being bombarded with the official version of everything. It's coming from the authorities' announcements and proclamations and explanations of events. It's coming from the newsroom television, coming from journalists on the TV that have been through the same system and got their information from the same source as the journalists in the newsroom. And it's also coming from the newspapers, see all of the above. So what you've got is people with a programmed version of world events getting their information from people with a programmed version of world events. I mean, it's just a gigantic self-fulfilling prophecy, this mainstream media.
Well, what you do so well on davidicke.com is you demonstrate how, for example, with the Ebola crisis and the alleged threat from Islamic State, what you do very well is you're able to show other examples of this sort of fear-mongering and this sort of storytelling. And that's what, I suppose, is kind of what began to kind of bring it home to me, just what's really going on. It's very important, isn't it, for you to do that, to say, well, look back a couple of years, look at what happened here, look what was said then. And you've demonstrated that the language is the exact same. In many cases, the players are the same. It's the same people going on these programs, telling us, to be terrified.
I mean, it always makes me smile. In a kind of cringing way, when I hear people say that the official version of 9/11 is true, and then I say to them, well, who told you the official version of 9/11? And of course, in the end, it comes down to the administrations of Bush and Blair. And the next question is, who told you there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that could hit British targets in 45 minutes? The same people in the official story of 9/11. So these techniques of manipulation, of course, work on the basis of, if they are effective, then don't change them, just keep doing it. And so we've had the basic scenario of, you are in danger. I'm going to give you now something to fear. Okay, you're frightened, are you? Yeah, right. Well, I've got good news, because I can now protect you from what I've made you frightened of. And there's just a little catch. It means giving your freedoms away. It means giving me carte blanche to do what I like, but we will protect you. And so Ebola, ISIS, global warming, all these things actually are the same thing. They may appear different because one's a disease and one's a kind of a vicious kind of army, and the other one is atmospheric, or claim to be. But actually, they're all the same. They're just symbols to fear, so that those that have made you fear can then change the world in the way they want, under the premise of protecting you from what they've got you to fear. That little explanation, Rich, you can apply that to everything, going back and back and back and back and back. You know, when I was in Africa researching, in Southern Africa, they were telling me how Cecil Rhodes, who was a Rothschild frontman, went in there, and of course he created the diamond mines and the gold mines for the Rothschilds. But what he was doing, he went in there and he would tell one tribe that another tribe was planning to attack them. He would tell the other tribe that the other tribe was planning to attack them. This would create animosity between them. A war would ensue. And at some point, one of the two tribes was going to be in danger of being wiped out. That point came. When that point came, Rhodes went in and said, look, the only way that you're going to survive is if you come under the protection of the British Empire. And so there was a catch for that. They gave control to the British Empire. They gave their land to the British Empire to be protected from a conflict, divide and rule conflict, which Rhodes had instigated from the start. Now move forward a little while, not too long, but a few decades, and you're into Henry Kissinger's shuttle diplomacy, in which he was doing the same. And again, what were they doing? And what do they do in these circumstances? They're doing it now in the Middle East. They're getting people to fear something. They've got Iraqis to fear ISIS, of course, created by the very people who are running the United States and British administrations, etc. And so Iraqis are accepting things happening that they wouldn't if ISIS didn't exist. I mean, it's just the constant same technique. Make them fear, save them from what you've got them to fear, over and over again. And you can see it everywhere, which you know it works.
Yeah, I mean, we played some clips on the show last night. I mean, I don't know if you saw this. I think you did, because I think you might have linked to it on davidicke.com. But what television? I mean, you've got to have some guts as a television executive to broadcast a program where William Crystal is interviewing Dick Cheney. If it wasn't so horribly disgusting, you'd laugh out loud and you think it was the best comedy of all time. But Crystal, one of the architects of the project for the new American century, speaking to a war criminal who bragged about torture in his autobiography.
And was also a member of the project for the new American century.
And was also a member as well.
Was a member.
Yeah, and they're sitting there talking about how, you know, there are many 9/11s to come if we don't tackle these guys head on. And you predicted a few weeks back that it wouldn't be long before they stop, you know, talking about airstrikes. And in fact, they would say airstrikes aren't working. Let's get some boots on the ground. And when Crystal was doing that interview, John McCain was on telly on another channel saying, boots on the ground. Boots on the ground.
This is exactly the plan. It's what I've been calling for years in the books, the totalitarian tiptoe. You go in steps. They knew that if they sold us an all-out war, ground troops, the whole shebang, from the start there'd be a massive rejection of it. They got confirmation of that when they didn't get support to attack Syria and Assad about a year ago.
Yeah.
So they do it in steps. Some people call it mission creep. I call it the totalitarian tiptoe. And so it was, if you remember, Cameron, the British Prime Minister, came out not that long ago, funnily enough, and said there will be no new war. And I actually did an image comment on that on the day, saying you're a bloody liar. You know there's going to be another war because it's been planned for decades. Of course, then we're in a new war. Then it was, we're not going to bomb. This is the British. We're not going to bomb in Syria. Well, they're already the ministers are already talking about the need to bomb in Syria to be effective, exactly as I predicted at the time. But I mean, don't take a genius to predict that. You just have to know how they work. And then there's Obama. Well, we're just going to do airstrikes. Well, he knows they ain't going to just do airstrikes. That's to mission creep further forward. And fully enough, I was watching yesterday on the Yesterday channel. They've got a series about the 60s, and this particular program was about the Vietnam War. And what happened in Vietnam is exactly the same that's happening now. It was, they sent advisors to start with, then they sent more advisors, then there was lots of advisors, all in uniform.
Yeah.
And then eventually, because the Gulf of Tonkin, no problem reaction solution, when the American ships were supposed to be attacked but weren't, that was then the justification to start the full-blown Vietnam War, which was a catastrophe for those fighting it on both sides. But it was absolutely the same technique. And so now they are making sure that the airstrikes are not effective because they don't want this ISIS to be blown away. They've spent billions creating it. They want them not to work. And so then they say, look, you know, we've tried airstrikes. It didn't work. They're still expanding. So what we need is boots on the ground. And of course, McCain is he's like an expeditionary force, John McCain. He probably wouldn't be able to put those number of syllables together. But he is. I mean, this is a piece of work, John McCain. He has never seen a country who didn't want to bomb this man.
No, and for a guy who saw up close the devastation of the Vietnam War and what it does to people, it's extraordinary. I want to just mention one thing that you spoke about a few weeks back on one of your video casts, or I can say video cast, that subscribers to davidicke.com get every week. It was when there was a debate in Parliament about, it was a laughable debate, of course, because obviously the Labour Party and the Conservatives had met beforehand and agreed that they would agree to airstrikes inside Iraq. But he said something, did David Cameron, extraordinarily, and only Peter Hain, the former Northern Ireland Secretary, actually had the decency to question it. He said, in future, if something happens really quickly, if an emergency arises somewhere overseas, I will commit British troops to action. And afterwards, I will come and explain myself to the House. I couldn't believe it. And I remember thinking, because you said something about it, and I thought, I wonder, because you're a little bit older than me, was there a time in your life that the BBC, a BBC journalist or a broadsheet journalist would have torn David Cameron to pieces for daring to say that if I feel like committing troops overseas, I'll do so and then explain it to Parliament?
Well, there may have been at one time. But not for a long time. I mean, maybe someone like Paxman might have done it. He was still around on Newsnight, but that was just slipping something in, hoping no one would notice, so that when he did it, he could then say, "Look, I said it in this Commons debate." And of course, it's like he said there'd be no new war, and then he said. That they wouldn't rule out airstrikes. And again, I put an image comment on social media and the website at that time. This is weeks ago now, many weeks ago, in which I said, what do you mean? You wouldn't rule out airstrikes. Airstrikes is on the script. There will be airstrikes. I mean, it's not difficult once you know how these things work to call these people. And what they want now is to get into Syria, because what this is really about in Syria is removing Assad. So you have the Turkish leader, a man who I wouldn't trust, to tell me the time in a room full of clocks, as they say, who is saying we'll only get involved with ground troops to fight ISIS if the deal is also to remove Assad. And you've now got, if you look, for instance, at the Daily Mail this morning and other things coming out of America, while this ISIS situation has been expanding and taking the focus, people in the media organizations and the politicians have gone quiet on Assad to a very, very large extent compared with what was going on before.
They certainly have.
But now they've reached the point where they've scammed themselves, in terms of the Americans anyway, they've scammed themselves into bombing parts of Syria. So they're already doing something, bombing the land of Syria, that the British and American parliaments, Congress, wouldn't sanction a year ago. So they've got round that now. What they need to do now is to get people to think that removing Assad is essential to getting rid of ISIS. And so now suddenly someone's pressed a button, clearly. We're seeing the re-demonization of Assad. It's so blatant. And the idea is to suck the Assad regime into this whole bombing ground troop deal so that they get rid of him. Because what's been happening, Rich, is they've been following a sequence of countries which was decided a long time ago. It was decided before the invasion of Afghanistan, long, long before. And they've used different excuses with each one. Indeed, in Libya and Syria, they're using the same excuse. They're killing their own people. Not mentioning that the people that are causing the conflict are so-called rebels, trained, armed, and funded by the British, the Americans, and NATO and Israel. And they've picked off Iraq with weapons of mass destruction. They picked off Afghanistan with Osama bin Laden is there, and he was behind 9/11. Libya, because Gaddafi was killing his own people. And Libya went relatively quickly because they pushed through when Gaddafi wasn't going as quick as they wanted. They pushed through this ludicrous UN resolution. I think it was resolution 1973, and then ignored its limitations and bombed the crap out of civilians in Libya and of course got rid of the Libyan regime. Now, they thought they were going to do that in Syria. But you look at the time, I think it was 2011, early 2011, when they first started the so-called Arab Spring, i.e., our rebels attacking the Assad regime. And they thought Assad would go far quicker than he has, but he hasn't. And so when they tried to pin the weapons of mass destruction, but the biological weapons attack on him in Syria around a year ago, it was to, and it was a lie, it was to give them the problem reaction solution excuse to go in and do to him what they did to Gaddafi with the UN resolution and the airstrikes. But they couldn't get it through. And so he's hung on again. So what we're seeing now is an effort to push it on. They're desperate to get rid of Assad because Assad leads them onto Iran. So it's like there's so many things going on and so many things that appear to be going on. But in the end, it's real simple. They're using every excuse they can to get rid of Assad and every excuse they can to create mayhem in the Middle East, which means that they can make the excuse to stay there militarily on a very large scale and acquire that land, acquire the resources that are on that land.
What about the part of Russia and the Chinese in all of this? Are they a genuine not what's the word I'm looking for here now? Are they a genuine cause for concern for the United States and those behind the United States, or are they all part of the plan anyway?
Well, the way I've seen it over the years, if you kind of imagine a pyramid and it's all broken up into sections. And one part of the pyramid goes from the bottom to the top, and it's called Russia. Another one goes from the bottom to the top, it's called the United States. Another one's called Britain. Another one's called China, etc. And at the top of the pyramid, all those sections meet. So at that level, that which is controlling Russia controls China, controls the United States, controls Israel, controls Britain. But as you go up those different sections up to the top of the pyramid, obviously the nearer you get to the top, the more you know about the big picture. And so it's always a call. How much does the leader of country A, country B, country C actually know? They're getting their orders and they're carrying out the will of that which is above them in the shadows. But how many actually know the full big picture? I think that, and what they do then is they play off people called world leaders who are lower down the pyramid, off against other world leaders who are lower down the pyramid. And I'm sure some of them don't even know the pyramid exists in the way I've described it, and some will. I think, however, if you get to the inner core of the United States and Russia and China and certainly Britain and Israel, you will be meeting people who do know what this whole plan is.
Got to ask you this. Sorry, go ahead. Finish that thought and I'll ask you a question. Go on.
Yeah, in the sense that, in the end, powerful as he may seem and powerful as these other people may seem, and some less so, I've got a picture of Cameron in mind when I say that. But when you think of Putin, you think of the Chinese leadership, you think of Obama, again, a big-time puppet. But in the end, the decisions which they carry out don't start with them. They start in the shadows. I mean, let's take this analogy, which is played out in the open, where you can see it basically. What happens in the European Union is that policy is decided by dark-suited bureaucrats in Brussels who've never seen a ballot box in their life in terms of the public. It then goes through the system and eventually gets officially passed by the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament. So they say the European Parliament has decided, or the Council of Ministers has decided, but actually what they've decided didn't start out with them. It started out with the bureaucrats. And in the same way, these movements, these political, geopolitical movements and actions and responses, they start out in the shadows. And then they come through eventually to the people we see, like the Putins and the Obamas and the Camerons. And then the media say the Cameron government has decided, Obama has decided, Putin has decided. Well, actually, that's only what the level of this whole decision making, which can be seen. It's actually all in the unseen where it's happening. So from this unseen comes the policies of China, comes the policies of Russia, comes the policies of Ukraine, the policies of Britain, the policies of America, the policies of Israel. And thus, at that inner core, deep in the shadows level of this global web, they are playing all these different countries and leaders off against each other. And as I've been saying now since way back in the 90s in the books, is that the idea is to bring China and Russia into a third world war with the United States, Britain, the NATO countries, and anyone else who wants to join in, to create a third world war which would complete the transformation of global society. Because if you look at the First World War, created by these same people, at the end of the war, power was in far, far fewer hands than it was before. Second World War, exactly the same. And all these global organizations, including the UN, came out of that. European Union came out of that to a very large extent. And the Bretton Woods Agreement and what became the World Bank all came out of the Second World War. There's nothing better than a war to transform global society and destroy what was there before. obviously. So the Third World War is designed to do the same. And what they want to come out of it is a world government, world central bank, world army, which would be an expanded global NATO, and a world currency with no cash, just electronic currency, which means that if they change the computer system, people won't be able to buy anything because the computer won't accept their cashless money. And so it's a cashless society is a colossal control mechanism. So this is what they want to come out of it. And, you know, this letter by Albert Pike, the mega high Freemason in America, which he's supposed to have sent to another Illuminati legend called Giuseppe Mazzini in 1871, talked about three world wars. It described the First World War, it described the Second World War, and then it described the third. And the third is coming together as described in the Middle East now. And one of the things that he said would happen at the time of the Third World War is that they would, quote, unleash the nihilists. And one definition of a nihilist are people with absolutely no moral background, no moral sense whatsoever. And that nihilism description perfectly fits this ISIL Islamic State. So it's kind of coming together, as they said. And what we've got to do is throw a spanner in the works by becoming streetwise of the game. That's what Wembley's about, becoming streetwise about the game, and then responding to that. And, you know, with the pressure on the politicians not to support the bombing of Syria a year ago, you can see that it is possible when people get wise to what's going on. And at that time, it was very encouraging, the number of people that suddenly could grasp this concept of problem, reaction, solution, creating a problem to offer the solution to. In this case, the biological weapons attack blamed on Assad in Syria. People didn't buy it. And that was a wonderful, a wonderfully encouraging moment to realize that had happened. What's happened now, however, is those people, many of those people that rejected that a year ago, are now saying, because of the manipulation, because of the creation of ISIS and the propaganda and the videos to horrify as much as possible, they're saying, well, we really don't want to go to war, but what choice have we got, given what ISIS are doing? So, you know, it's a constant mind game, and we need to constantly ask the same question again and again and again. Who benefits? Who benefits from me believing what they're telling me? And again, the answer to that question will be anyone that wants to do what this cabal wants to do.
Our listeners will be annoyed that we're going to end this now in the next couple of minutes, but because ordinarily we would speak for a lot longer. And when you have had a rest after Wembley, you're going to come on and we're going to do a show on various things like the endemic paedophilia at levels of, you know, extraordinary levels of society here in Great Britain. Just a quick one, just before we do wrap it up and you go and do more work, because I know you're up to your eyes there. You started out around 25 years ago because you felt deep down inside you that something was very, very wrong, and you realised what it was, and you said about telling people through touring the world and writing books and doing appearances. Where are we today? Where are you today, do you think, on your journey? Are you more optimistic now in 2014 than you were back in 1989, 1990?
Well, I think I have come to terms and found peace in the appreciation that the world changes as people choose to change themselves. And so where we go from here depends on where people choose to go from here. The point being, however, that it's one of the last book is called The Perception Deception. That just sums it up, those two words, because that's what the whole thing is. If you can manipulate someone's perception of something, you control the way they think, you control what they'll accept, you control what they support, you control what they'll challenge. Everything comes from perception. And so what we're involved in here is a battle for human perception. And this is why I've spent the last 25 years trying to get information out that people wouldn't normally hear or see, to balance out that perception deception. Because if you don't see that there are other ways, and there is a phenomenal mass of evidence to suggest that there are other ways of explaining world events, then when the authorities tell you the version of something, you've got nothing to compare it with. All you've got is what they say. It may not feel right sometimes, but still you say, well, I don't know what else could have happened then. But when you've got this body, this now massive body, I mean, I've spent 25 years putting it together, just me, never mind all the other stuff, of information showing that there are other ways to look at world events which are far more credible than the official versions of everything. Then you've got something to compare the official version with. And then you can find it wanting. And then the penny will drop. They're actually lying to us, not here and there, but lying to us almost every time they open their mouths or issue a statement. And the reason, like I said at the start, Rich, is that why Wembley is the length that it is because there are so many strands to explain and strands to connect to other strands so the tapestry can be seen. Because all the elements that we need in terms of information, awareness, knowledge, to put the picture together are kept from us. That's why they're not talked about in the education system, not talked about by academia, not talked about by science or medicine or politics or journalism. All these things are never talked about because it's the essential information spectrum that puts the world, life, reality into its true perspective. And so all people like me can do is do everything they can to make sure that people can have access to that information. And then what they do with it decides where we go. But the fact is, if they don't get access to it, they're not going to do anything with it. And the official version of everything will prevail. And this whole Orwellian nightmare will manifest. Am I
optimistic?
Am I optimistic? Do you know something, mate? When I look at the world today, I shouldn't be. I really shouldn't be. But I am. Because it takes a long time to make a dam crack. But once the cracks appear, it can collapse very quickly after that. And there's no doubt that if you look around, especially someone like me who started out 25 years ago, and there was virtually no audience for this information, the cracks are certainly appearing compared with that. And the cracks can only get bigger because once people realize that they've been lied to by the authorities about A, the next question is, well, what the heck else are they lying to me about? And they're the cracks, and the cracks become chasms, and the dam falls. So am I optimistic? Yes. From the 5 cents level of everything, I shouldn't be, but I am.
Brilliant.
I don't think I've been on this journey all this time for it to end at a buffer stop. It's going somewhere, and I can see it. I can see it going somewhere. How quick, that depends on how people respond to the information that is now being put before them.
Anybody who's going to be around London on October the 25th, which is in about 9 days' time, there are some tickets available. The event is sold as well as the previous time David was in Wembley, but there are tickets available on davidicke.com/tickets, and on davidicke.com as well there are links to buying The Perception Deception, David's most recent book, which is a fantastic book, and his other books as well. Just before we go, last few seconds, sincere thanks to you from Volcania Radio for your support for the project. We're being listened to tonight now on Talk Radio Europe, on Fab Radio International, and around Europe, and that wouldn't be possible if you hadn't have given your support and carried Volcania Radio. So it's my opportunity to publicly thank you for doing that. It's a great gesture, an unsurprising one, but a great one.
Well, Rich, you do such a great job because your interviewing style is terrific for this information. You let people speak and you question them rightly when they need to be. And when the people's voice was starting to go not great, immediately, this is the way my personality is. Immediately, it's okay. So where do we go now? Because we can't just let this thing go and not keep this information going out there. And as you well know, I said to you, I've got a plan B, and it's what Volcania Radio became. And I think, in the last few weeks since the start, it's been absolutely terrific. I mean, the guests are brilliant. They're allowed without censorship to say what they want to say. Not without question, but without censorship. And I just think it's a great show. And let me make this appeal. Obviously, I'm not involved in it, but I massively support it. And it's great to have it on davidicke.com. If there's any other radio stations out there or any other websites out there that want to take Volcania Radio, then you get it, because we want this information night after night after night out to the biggest possible audience. And you've made a great start, Rich, and I think this could really go somewhere and be built upon as we go on.
Well, you're too kind. Thanks for doing that, and thanks for saying that. Look, I can't wait to see you in Wembley in, as I said, about 10 days' time. In the meantime, continued success with the preparations, and thanks for stepping out of those to give us your time today. Great to talk to you again, mate.
No problem. Thanks, Richard. Just a quick one. In terms of the tickets, they are closing in on being full.
Gone. Yeah, that's right.
People want to get tickets. It needs to be quick, I think. So I'm told by the arena.
Yeah, that's great, mate. Thanks again.
Cheers, Rich.
Wake up and smell the coffee at volcaniainternational.com.